Michael Learned spent decades concealing a profound, secret truth about Ralph Waite. On the screen, they were the flawless, devoted couple, John and Olivia Walton, the heart of a perfect family. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the walls of their reality were far more complicated, and perhaps far more heartbreaking. For nearly 10 years, they shared an intimacy that existed just beneath the surface, a mutual admiration, an unspoken affection, and a bond so powerful neither dared to acknowledge it. Not during the long, rigorous filming days, not in the spotlight of public life, and certainly not as their paths continuously diverged. This secret remained locked away for over 4 decades. But recently, Michael finally broke her silence, and the raw, tender details she shared about Ralph Waite have brought dedicated fans to tears. When the Waltons premiered in 1972, virtually no one, not the network, the skeptical critics, nor the initial audience, could have foreseen its monumental success. A quiet, gentle story of a rural family enduring the trials of the Great Depression, it wasn't designed for the cutthroat world of prime-time TV. Yet, it captured the American spirit almost instantly. Viewers didn't just passively watch the show, they were emotionally absorbed by it. At the very center of this powerful emotional field were Michael Learned and Ralph Waite. She embodied Olivia Walton, the nurturing, steel-spined mother, while he was John Walton Sr., the rock-steady, profoundly compassionate father. Together they conjured a home so genuinely warm and real that millions of viewers ached to be adopted into it. Their on-screen chemistry was instant, magnetic, and completely undeniable. But what few people realized was that behind that compelling facade, a much more volatile, deeper reality was unfolding. What audiences never grasped was the profound, silent drama taking place off-camera, a connection far eclipsing the demands of the script or the brilliance of their shared performances. Michael Learned was a newcomer to television, a classically trained stage actress who had never faced a camera before joining the Waltons. Ralph Waite also carried the gravitas of a theater background. Both were intensely dedicated, passionate, and driven by an artistic zeal for their craft. But their link transcended mere professionalism from the very first rehearsal. They possessed an almost psychic understanding of one another. Their emotional depth, their rhythm, and their timing aligned so effortlessly it was shocking. It didn't feel like acting, it felt like a genuine, profound soul bond. Michael later confessed that an undeniable magnetic pull existed between them from their first meeting. Still, they forged a silent, unspoken pact. They would never cross the line. Michael was already married and Ralph was navigating a painful divorce. Both valued their deep friendship and the integrity of the beloved show too much to risk shattering everything. So they masterfully concealed their true feelings, offering warm smiles for the cameras, standing shoulder to shoulder in countless iconic scenes, but never once giving voice to the desperate longing in their hearts. Michael eventually admitted that her heart had been completely lost to Ralph early on, a fierce, protective love that they consciously chose never to pursue romantically. "We were in love," she once stated with arresting simplicity, "but we were not lovers." It's a distinction burdened with a lifetime of emotional weight and quiet sacrifice. What makes their story so absolutely compelling wasn't just the sheer depth of their affection, it was their staggering restraint. Despite working side by side for nearly a decade, sharing countless emotional scenes and long, draining filming days, they kept their love utterly unspoken. Remarkably, no one on the set ever truly suspected the truth, though occasionally their genuine feelings would surface in flashes. A glance that lingered a moment too long, a gentle touch that felt unexpectedly protective, a scene that somehow felt too achingly real. The piercing authenticity came directly from the truth simmering between them. As the Waltons became a cultural phenomenon, Michael and Ralph were cemented as the emotional, moral compass of the show. They were the very embodiment of quiet strength, family values, and unconditional compassion, not just in character, but in the truth of their private relationship. They supported each other through deep personal hardships, shared laughter, and offered a non-judgmental understanding, all without ever breaking their sacred, silent promise. What began as a working partnership quietly evolved into one of the most profound, unspoken love stories in Hollywood history. And while the world watched Olivia and John Walton successfully raise their family, few ever realized that behind the camera, Michael Learned and Ralph Waite were silently living out their own complex, bittersweet version of love, one destined to remain a secret for many more decades. The two actors were experiencing something intensely personal, genuine, and profoundly tender. Their connection was not the stuff of dramatic scandal. It was meaningful, quiet, and sacred. It revealed itself in the smallest, most vulnerable ways. A shared, knowing smile, a small, reassuring touch between takes, or a wordless, instinctual glance when a scene became emotionally overwhelming. Those who worked alongside them perpetually commented on their unbelievable chemistry, assuming it was merely the result of a brilliant casting decision. But the truth was much deeper. Michael and Ralph were both formidable, fiercely passionate individuals. They inspired and challenged each other professionally, but what elevated their bond was their ability to truly see one another's souls. If Ralph was having a difficult day, Michael sensed it instantly. When Michael struggled, Ralph was invariably there with a quiet, grounding support. Their instinctive understanding of each other was rare. Despite this unparalleled closeness, they maintained an ironclad professionalism. Michael began the Waltons as a married woman, and though her marriage dissolved during the show's run, she remained fiercely cautious. Ralph, too, was wrestling with significant personal demons. Their deep connection, though overflowing with warmth and powerful unspoken affection, was built entirely on respect. Ralph was battling alcoholism and painstakingly rebuilding his life. The timing between them felt permanently, tragically wrong. And perhaps they both knew that crossing that invisible line could cost them everything: the show, their reputations, and the fragile trust they had cultivated. Yet there were moments, quietly, achingly human. Michael has since shared how Ralph would sometimes simply take her hand during breaks, gently and protectively, how he would effortlessly lift her spirits when she was consumed by self-doubt. He made her feel safe, supported, and unconditionally unjudged. A fundamental warmth existed between them that required no articulation. Over time, that quiet affection deepened into something truly profound. It was not the fiery, fleeting kind of romance, but the steady, enduring, slow-burning love that lingers patiently, heartbreakingly silent. Michael once described their bond as a spiritual connection, something that utterly transcended conventional romance. They were kindred souls, two people shaped by hardship, loss, and the shared search for healing, who found solace and perfect understanding only in each other's silent company. Even as their profound emotional closeness intensified, they religiously held to their established boundaries. For nearly 10 solid years, they worked side by side, always near enough to feel the intense pull, yet always held just agonizingly out of reach. It is tempting for us to romanticize a story like theirs, but that is simply not the truth of what Michael and Ralph shared. Their love was quietly sadder, more meaningful. Their decision to not act on their fierce feelings wasn't born of fear. It was born of deep, mutual respect. Respect for each other, for their shared art, and for the sacredness of a feeling that felt too pure to risk. Even decades later, when Michael finally spoke about their relationship, her words carried no detectable bitterness, only profound tenderness, wistful nostalgia, and a deep, quiet gratitude for a love that was never spoken aloud, yet was always perfectly understood. When the Waltons finally concluded its run in 1981, it was more than just another show signing off. For Michael Learned and Ralph Waite, saying goodbye was the wrenching experience of stepping away from a world they had meticulously built together. In the decades that followed, both continued to flourish professionally. Michael embraced new roles, while Ralph found a powerful resurgence with impactful appearances on major shows like NCIS and Bones. They both achieved professional fulfillment, yet neither ever truly replaced the bond they had shared. Off-screen, they remained steadfast, close friends. But the deeper truth, the quiet, intense emotional connection, remained hidden. For years, Michael never spoke of it, carrying that immense love privately and with absolute respect. Only later, long after the spotlight had dimmed, did she begin to share fragments of her story. She admitted simply that she had been utterly in love with Ralph Waite, not in a fleeting way, but with a love that was enduring, real, and profoundly, beautifully human. It was a love built entirely on deep understanding, mutual respect, and the shared, poignant experience of two souls who had found each other at the right place, but tragically at the wrong time. It was a love that silently endured for decades, unspoken, yet powerfully present. For all those years, Michael never breathed a word of it. Many dedicated fans have wondered why she maintained that intense silence for so long. But for Michael, her silence sprang from a deep desire to protect something incredibly precious. She never wanted to tarnish the memory or permit something so sacred to be reduced to a tawdry headline. When she finally did speak about it, her words were calm and full of grace. "We were in love," she confessed, "but we never crossed the line." It's a single sentence burdened with a lifetime of emotional weight. What makes their story so absolutely compelling was their noble choice to leave it forever unspoken. Fans of the Waltons had always felt a genuine connection between John and Olivia, and now they know their instincts were correct. The love was indisputably real. Michael didn't reveal her story for attention. She spoke out because it was finally time, because Ralph was gone. Grief often unlocks the hidden doors time keeps tightly sealed. When Ralph Waite tragically passed away in 2014, a massive wave of heartfelt tributes poured in. For Michael, the devastating loss was agonizingly personal. His passing permanently marked the end of a chapter that had never been fully written. In interviews around that painful time, Michael frequently found it nearly impossible to speak about Ralph without her voice visibly breaking. She finally quietly confessed what she had carried for so long. She had loved him, had always loved him, and she had never, ever told him. That raw, simple truth struck a universal chord with millions of fans because nearly everyone understands the painful experience of holding back vital words. Michael also shared her belief that Ralph had loved her too. They never explicitly discussed it. Instead, it existed as a powerful mutual understanding, a sacred unspoken pact. After Ralph's death, Michael finally began to speak about him with a heartbreaking tenderness. There were no grand declarations, just the gentle, deep heartbreak of a woman who had loved profoundly and waited simply too long to say it. "We never crossed the line," she said softly, "but we were in love." That final phrase broke something open in the hearts of longtime fans. Every tender touch on screen took on a powerful new meaning. It wasn't just exceptional acting, it was real, genuine love, carefully wrapped in ironclad restraint. There was never any scandal. Only two people who met at the precisely wrong time, who loved each other intensely in silence, and who ultimately chose to do the right thing for everyone but themselves. Michael's story is a powerful lesson about timing, boundaries, and the agonizing choices we make to protect what matters most. For Michael, that ultimate cost was never telling the man she deeply loved how she truly felt. But when she finally, bravely shared the truth, She offered both herself and her devoted audience a profound kind of peace. The love may have tragically remained unspoken, but it was never forgotten. Now, years later, fans view the Waltons through an entirely different lens. They finally understand the quiet, immense truth that existed behind those heartwarming scenes. They no longer see just Olivia and John. They see two real people, two complex hearts quietly navigating a true love they could never fully claim. For over 4 decades, Michael carried her love for Ralph like a letter she never mailed. She never tried to rewrite their story. Instead, she allowed the Waltons to stand for what it was. And in that quiet dignity, she beautifully reflected her own private heartbreak. Grief has a way of violently uncovering the raw truths we once thought we could hold on to forever. After Ralph's sudden passing, Michael could no longer keep it all inside. So she finally said it simply and honestly, "We were in love." Why not all those decades ago? Because sometimes silence is love. The act of keeping something sacred, of ferociously protecting another person's delicate peace, is its own extraordinary kind of devotion. Michael remained silent, not out of fear, but out of a deep, abiding respect. She cared too profoundly for Ralph Waite to turn their private bond into a public spectacle. His devastating absence created the immense space for words she had long kept brutally buried. She wasn't trying to change how people remembered the show. She was merely confirming what so many had always quietly suspected, that the tangible love audiences felt between John and Olivia Walton was born from somewhere undeniably real. It's about profound restraint, immense grace, and the quiet, monumental sacrifices people willingly make out of deep loyalty. By finally telling her truth, Michael was gently, finally closing old wounds. Theirs was never a story of betrayal. It was about two people who loved each other in a world that didn't allow that love to exist freely. So instead of forcing it to break, they carried it silently with dignity. Now, decades later, fans look back on the Waltons with new eyes. That quiet hug, that tender goodbye, the softness in Ralph's voice. Those were not just stunning performances. They were fragments of a deeper, living truth. And in finally speaking it, she permitted others to grieve their own unsaid words, to remember their own might-have-beens, and to see that even the very quietest love stories are still love stories. Because love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's a secret held close for a lifetime, cherished, protected, and at last, beautifully released. But after Ralph was permanently gone, something vital in her shifted. She finally spoke the words she had never dared to utter aloud. "We were in love." And in that beautifully simple, ultimate confession, she implicitly gave millions permission to finally remember their own silent loves, their own quiet, unspoken goodbyes, and their own gentle, aching regrets. For devoted fans of the Waltons, her words simultaneously changed everything and absolutely nothing, because deep in their hearts, they had always instinctively known. They saw it in every single look, every subtle protective touch, every line spoken between Olivia and John Walton. Now they finally and fully understand why it felt so undeniably real. Because it was. And for Michael that immense, final truth was never intended to shock or cause surprise. It was simply the final, essential piece of a love story she had carried quietly and profoundly all her life. What existed between Michael and Ralph Waite wasn't written. It wasn't planned. And for years, it wasn't even audibly spoken. It lived powerfully in the spaces between the lines, in the way he looked at her across the dinner table. For over 40 years, Michael kept that love private. She simply carried it with grace. But after Ralph was gone, she finally said the words she had never dared to utter aloud. "We were in love." For fans of the Waltons, her words changed everything and nothing, because deep down, they had always known. Now they understand why it felt so real. Because it was.